A ranch foreman tried to run a black female trucker off his land, but he froze when he saw the single item she calmly placed on her dashboard. It wasn't a weapon, it was something much more dangerous. The 18-wheeler's engine rumbled, the only sound cutting through the thick Texas heat. A dusty pickup truck blocked the dirt road leading to the Redstone cattle ranch. The foreman, J.D., leaned against his door, arms crossed over his chest. He spat on the ground. "This is private property. Turn that rig around and get lost." The woman behind the wheel, Ilara, didn't respond. She just watched him, her expression unreadable. J.D.'s face hardened. "You deaf? I said leave." Ilara slowly reached over, opened her glove box, and pulled out a small framed photo. She placed it on the dashboard in clear view. J.D. squinted, then his eyes widened. His tough guy posture vanished instantly. If you believe no one is above the law, support our channel by hitting the like button, subscribing for more stories, and telling us your city, along with the word justice, in the comments below. Ilara was a federal agent, 3 months into the deepest undercover assignment of her career. Her target was the Redstone Cattle Ranch, a sprawling, isolated property owned by a powerful family with connections that ran all the way to the state capital. Officially, she was just another long-haul trucker hired to transport cattle feed and supplies. Unofficially, she was the tip of the spear in an investigation into a sophisticated human trafficking ring that used remote ranches as waypoints. Her call sign was Echo, and for all intents and purposes, her real identity was buried under layers of federal secrecy. Her only contact was a handler she spoke to on a satellite phone once every 48 hours. Out here, she was completely on her own. Her primary obstacle was J.D. Vance, the ranch foreman. He was a man carved from the harsh landscape itself, suspicious, controlling, and fiercely territorial. He ruled the ranch hands through fear and had made it clear from Ilara's first day that he didn't like outsiders, especially not a black woman operating a big rig on what he considered his personal kingdom. He watched her every move, waiting for a single mistake, a single sign of weakness he could use to get rid of her. He tested her constantly, changing her routes at the last minute, assigning her the oldest, most run-down equipment, and making comments just loud enough for her to hear. The mission was simple on paper: infiltrate, observe, and gather enough evidence to bring the entire network down. But the reality was a constant nerve-wracking tightrope walk. Every conversation was a potential trap. Every friendly face could be a mask for a monster. The photo she'd placed on her dash was of J.D., his own missing sister, who had vanished without a trace 5 years earlier. A cold case Ilara had personally reviewed. It was a calculated risk, a psychological play to knock him off balance and see what cracks would appear in his armor. Her investigation would soon reveal that the trafficking operation was just the surface of a much deeper conspiracy, one that implicated local law enforcement and a respected town judge. To get the truth, Ilara would have to form an uneasy alliance with the very man who wanted her gone, forcing them both to confront the darkness that festered just beneath the sun-scorched earth of the ranch. But when you're surrounded by enemies, and your only potential ally is just as dangerous, who can you really trust? Undefined. J.D. took a slow step toward the truck, his hand instinctively going to his hip before he stopped himself. The bravado was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate edge. "Where did you get that picture?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Ilara met his gaze in her side mirror. "I find things," she said, her tone level. "Sometimes I find things that people have been trying to keep buried." She didn't offer any more explanation. She didn't need to. The hook was set. He stared at the photo of his sister, Sarah, a smiling girl at a county fair, frozen in time before she vanished. The official story was that she ran away. J.D. never believed it. He clenched his jaw, the muscle twitching. "Get your truck to the loading bay, we'll talk later." He stepped back and waved her through, his eyes following the 18-wheeler until it disappeared around a bend. For the first time, JD didn't see an unwanted outsider. He saw a threat, but also a sliver of something he hadn't felt in 5 years: hope. The atmosphere at the Redstone Cattle Ranch was thick with unspoken rules. The other ranch hands were a tight-lipped crew who moved with a purpose that felt more like guarding a prison than tending to cattle. They watched Ilara unload her rig, their faces blank masks. One of them, a wiry man named Riggs, made a point of bumping into her hard. "Watch where you're going," he sneered. Ilara didn't flinch, she just looked at him, a silent promise in her eyes that made him take a step back. She knew these men weren't just cowboys. They were enforcers. Later that night, Ilara slipped into the main office. The building was quiet, the only sound the hum of an old refrigerator. Using a lockpick set no thicker than a credit card, she was inside in under 30 seconds. She didn't turn on the lights. A small pen light held between her teeth was all she needed. She went straight for the filing cabinets, her real target, the shipping logs. She photographed page after page with a micro camera. The numbers didn't add up. The ranch was ordering enough food, water, and medical supplies to sustain a small town, not a few dozen ranch hands. There were invoices from a shell corporation she recognized from another federal case, a company known for supplying trafficking networks. Her work was interrupted by the sound of an approaching engine. She killed her light and moved to the window. A livestock truck, identical to the ones used for cattle, was pulling up, but it wasn't heading for the pens. It drove toward a large, windowless barn on the far side of the property, a place JD had warned her was off-limits. She slipped out of the office and made her way through the shadows. From a safe distance, she watched as the back of the truck opened. There were no cattle inside. Instead, a group of terrified-looking men and women were forced out, their faces pale in the moonlight. They were herded into the barn by Riggs and 2 other men. The heavy doors slammed shut and a thick metal bar was dropped into place. This was it. This was the proof she needed. As she turned to leave, a figure stepped out from behind a water trough, blocking her path. It was JD. His face was a grim silhouette against the night sky. "You're not here to haul feed, are you?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You've been snooping around since the day you got here. You need to tell me what you're really after." Before Ilara could formulate a response, a pair of headlights cut through the darkness, pinning them both in the bright beams. A black SUV rolled to a stop and the driver's side door opened. A man in an expensive suit stepped out. It was Mr. Sterling, the owner of the ranch, a man who was rarely seen on the property. He looked at Ilara, then at JD, and a cold, predatory smile spread across his face. "JD, it seems our new driver is a little too curious. Maybe you should have handled this sooner." JD's body went rigid. The headlights painted Sterling in an almost demonic glow, his expensive suit looking completely out of place against the dirt and dust of the ranch. Ilara, however, didn't move a muscle. Her gaze remained fixed on Sterling, her posture relaxed but ready. She was an apex predator caught in the open, deciding if the threat was worth engaging. "I pay you to manage my assets, JD," Sterling said, his voice smooth as silk, but laced with venom. "Not to fraternize with the help, especially when they wander into places they don't belong." He gestured dismissively toward the barn. "Riggs, get our curious friend here. Take her to the barn. She can join our other inventory. Then you and I will have a long talk about your performance." Riggs and another ranch hand stepped forward, their knuckles cracking as they flexed their hands. JD didn't move. His eyes flickered from Sterling to Ilara, then to the barn, where he now knew unspeakable things were happening. The image of his sister's photo on Ilara's dashboard burned in his mind. Before Sterling could give another command, Ilara spoke, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "Ask him, JD." Everyone froze. "Ask him what happened to the girls who were here 5 years ago," Ilara continued, her eyes locked on JD, the ones who looked just like the people in that barn. "Girls like Sarah, Sterling's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. That was all the confirmation Ilara needed. JD's face turned ashen. The unspoken horror he had lived with for years was suddenly real, standing right in front of him in a tailored suit. "Shut her up!" Sterling snapped. Riggs lunged. Ilara moved with a speed that defied her appearance. She sidestepped his clumsy grab, pivoted on her heel, and drove her elbow into the side of his head. Riggs stumbled, dazed. The second man came at her, and she dropped low, sweeping his legs out from under him. He hit the ground with a grunt. It was chaos. In that split second, JD made his choice. As Sterling reached inside his jacket, JD charged, not at Ilara, but at his boss, tackling him around the waist. The two men crashed against the side of the SUV. A handgun clattered onto the dirt. "Go!" JD yelled at Ilara, wrestling with a furious Sterling. "Get out of here!" Ilara didn't run for the road. She knew she'd never make it. Instead, she grabbed the fallen handgun and sprinted toward the darkest part of the ranch, away from the lights. "This way!" she shouted back at JD. "Follow me!" Shots rang out as Riggs, now recovered, opened fire. The bullets whizzed past them, kicking up dust. JD shoved Sterling hard into another ranch hand and scrambled after Ilara, the betrayal of the last 5 years fueling his desperate flight. They ducked behind a row of rusted-out tractors. "Where are we going?" JD panted, his chest heaving. "Somewhere they won't look first," Ilara replied, already scanning their surroundings, her mind working through tactical options. "Is there anywhere on this ranch that's old, forgotten?" JD thought for a second. "The old storm cellar, under the original homestead. It's been abandoned for decades." "Lead the way," she ordered. They moved through the darkness, a strange and desperate team. The foreman, who had tried to intimidate her, was now her only ally, and the undercover agent he distrusted was his only chance at finding the truth. They could hear shouts and the sound of engines starting up behind them. The entire ranch was turning into a hunting party, and they were the prey. They reached a dilapidated wooden structure, and JD pulled at a heavy slanted door set into the ground. With a groan of protest, it opened, revealing a set of stone steps leading down into absolute blackness. "After you," Ilara said, covering their backs with the gun. As they descended into the damp, musty air, they heard Sterling's voice echo across the property, cold and clear. "Find them. I don't care what it takes. Nobody leaves this ranch alive." JD pulled the heavy cellar door shut, plunging them into a thick, suffocating darkness. The air was cold and smelled of damp earth and decay. Above them, they could hear the faint sounds of truck engines and men shouting. The hunt was on. "Okay," JD breathed, his voice tight with adrenaline and fear. "No more games. Who are you? How do you know about my sister?" Ilara waited a moment, letting her eyes adjust to the near-total blackness. She could just make out the hulking silhouette of the man beside her. "My name is Ilara Vance," she said, using her real last name for the first time in months. "I'm a federal agent. I've been investigating Sterling for 6 months." The silence that followed was heavier than the darkness. JD was quiet for so long that Ilara wondered if he had heard her. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "A Fed? Of course. All this time, I thought you were just trouble." He let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "I wasn't wrong, I guess." "Sterling isn't just moving people, JD," Ilara continued, her voice low and direct. "He's part of a network that spans 3 states. The Redstone Ranch is his main holding and distribution center. The people in that barn are just the latest shipment." "Why didn't you just call the sheriff?" JD asked, a note of anger in his voice. "Why the whole trucker act?" "Because your sheriff is on Sterling's payroll," Ilara stated flatly. "So is Judge Miller downtown. I ran the case file on your sister's disappearance." "You reported it? Went to Sheriff Brody yourself. What did he tell you? That she was a wild kid? That she probably just ran off with some boy?" JD didn't answer. He didn't have to. Ilara had recited the sheriff's dismissive words almost verbatim. He had trusted the system, and it had failed him, leaving him to nurse his grief and suspicion alone. He finally understood why Ilara had to operate this way. Out here, they were the only law that mattered. "I suspected things weren't right," JD admitted, his voice cracking. "I saw the extra supplies, the late-night trucks. I told myself it was none of my business. Sterling paid well, and he told me not to ask questions. I didn't want to believe it could be this." He ran a hand over his face. "God, Sarah." As he spoke, his foot hit something soft on the floor. He knelt down, fumbling in his pocket for a lighter. He flicked it on, the small flame casting long, dancing shadows on the stone walls. In the flickering light, they saw they weren't alone. The cellar was filled with discarded remnants of past lives, a small, worn-out sneaker, a tattered blanket, and what JD's foot had kicked, a handmade doll with yarn for hair. It was a gut punch. This wasn't just a hiding place, it was a cage. People had been kept here before, maybe even his sister. The abstract horror of the trafficking operation suddenly became intensely personal and real. JD stared at the doll, his tough exterior crumbling completely. Ilara put a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was firm, professional, but not without empathy. "We can't stay here," she said, her voice pulling him back from the edge. "My satellite phone is in my rig. It's my only way to contact my team and call for a real extraction, not Brody's men. We need to get to it." JD looked up from the doll, his eyes hardening with a new resolve. The grief was still there, but now it was forged into a weapon. "Sterling will have men all over the main yard. They'll be watching the truck." "I know," Ilara said. "That's why we're not going to walk there. You're the foreman. You know every inch of this place. The drainage ditches, the irrigation tunnels. You're going to get me to my truck." JD nodded, his purpose clear. He extinguished the lighter and moved to the far wall of the cellar. He ran his hands over the cold stones until he found what he was looking for, a section where the mortar was crumbling. "This used to connect to the old irrigation system," he whispered, digging his fingers into the gaps. "It's a straight shot to the main yard." Using a loose rock, he pried at the stones. One came loose, then another, until a dark, narrow opening was revealed. The pipe was narrow, forcing them to crawl on their hands and knees. The smell of stagnant water and rust filled the air. Every sound was amplified, the scrape of their clothes against the metal, their own ragged breathing. Above them, they could hear the constant rumble of trucks crisscrossing the ranch, their engines a dull roar that vibrated through the ground. At one point, footsteps pounded on the ground directly above them. A beam from a flashlight cut through a small grate just ahead, sweeping the inside of the pipe before moving on. They froze, not daring to breathe, until the footsteps faded. "How much further?" Ilara asked, her voice a low whisper that barely carried. "Another 50 yards, JD replied. "It comes out in a drainage ditch right behind the main garage. Your rig is parked just beyond it." They emerged from the pipe into the muddy ditch, covered in grime, but undetected. The night was alive with activity. Sterling's men were fanned out, their flashlights cutting cones of light through the darkness, but their attention was focused on the barns and the main house. No one was looking in a forgotten drainage ditch. Ilara's 18-wheeler stood like a silent giant in the distance. Two of Sterling's men stood near the front, smoking cigarettes, their rifles slung over their shoulders. "They're guarding it," JD stated the obvious. "We'll never get past them." "We don't have to," Ilara said. She pointed to a stack of empty fuel barrels near the garage. "Create a diversion, something loud. When they go to check it out, I'll make a break for the cab. You follow as soon as it's clear." JD gave a grim nod and slipped away into the shadows. A minute later, there was a tremendous crash as the tower of metal barrels toppled over, clattering and booming across the yard. The two guards cursed and jogged over to investigate the noise. It was the opening Ilara needed. She moved with astonishing speed, a blur of motion across the 30 yards of open ground. She pulled herself up into the cab, silently closing the door behind her. She kept low, below the window line, and immediately reached into a hidden compartment built into the dashboard. Her fingers met empty space. She tore open the compartment where she kept the phone. It was empty. The small emergency beacon was gone too. Sterling's men had been here first. They had been thorough. Their only lifeline to the outside world was gone. Just as the realization hit her, a face appeared in the passenger side window. It was Riggs. His eyes widened in shock, and then a malicious grin spread across his face. He raised his rifle. Elara didn't hesitate. She threw herself sideways as the window exploded, showering the cab with glass. "Get in!" she yelled at JD, who was sprinting toward the truck. She slammed the driver's side door, her hand already reaching for the ignition. The massive engine roared to life with a sound that drowned out the shouting. JD yanked the passenger door open and scrambled inside as Elara stomped on the accelerator. The 18-wheeler lurched forward. More shots rang out, pinging off the metal frame of the truck. "We're trapped!" JD yelled over the engine. "The main gate is blocked!" Elara's eyes were cold steel. "He thinks he's trapped us," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "He's wrong. He just trapped himself in here with me." She spun the wheel hard, not toward the gate, but directly toward the off-limits barn. "We're not just escaping, we're getting those people out." JD grabbed the dashboard, his knuckles white. "Are you insane?" he shouted over the screaming engine. "That's a solid wood barn." "It won't be for long," Elara replied, her face illuminated by the dashboard lights, calm and focused. The 18-wheeler, a multi-ton battering ram, accelerated across the yard. Sterling's men, caught completely off guard, scattered like birds. Sterling himself dove out of the way, his expensive suit covered in dust as he rolled to a stop. His face was a mask of pure fury. He had lost control, and he knew it. The massive steel bumper met the wooden wall with a deafening explosion of splintered timber and twisted metal. The truck plowed halfway into the structure before grinding to a halt, its headlights cutting through the dusty darkness inside. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the hiss of the air brakes and the settling of debris. Inside the barn, dozens of terrified faces stared at the mechanical beast that had just torn their prison open. They were huddled together, blinking in the sudden harsh light, unsure if this was a new form of terror or a rescue. Elara was already moving. "JD, cover me!" she yelled, kicking her door open and grabbing the handgun. She jumped to the ground and ran to the back of her rig, unlatching the doors to the empty trailer. "Everybody, to the truck! Now! Get in the trailer!" Her voice was a commanding crack of thunder that broke the spell of fear. A few people started to move, then more, a wave of desperate humanity scrambling toward the promise of escape. The reaction from Sterling's men was swift. Gunshots erupted from the darkness, bullets sparking off the truck's frame. JD, now fully committed, leaned out the passenger window with the other handgun and returned fire, aiming not to kill, but to suppress, to keep their heads down. "They're shooting at us!" a man screamed, falling back in panic. "They'll do worse if you stay here," JD roared back. "Move, go!" It was organized chaos. Elara stood by the trailer doors, a shield of calm resolve, pulling people up, directing them inside. A young woman tripped and fell. JD laid down a burst of covering fire while Elara darted out, pulled the woman to her feet, and shoved her toward the trailer. Riggs appeared from behind a stack of hay bales, his rifle aimed directly at Elara. "Going somewhere?" he sneered. Before he could pull the trigger, JD fired. The shot went wide, but it was enough to make Riggs flinch and take cover. "This is between you and me, you son of a bitch!" JD yelled, jumping from the cab. He knew he was drawing fire, but it was the only way to keep their attention off Elara and the evacuees. The last of the captives scrambled into the trailer. Elara slammed the heavy doors shut and bolted them. "JD, now!" she screamed. JD fired his last 2 rounds toward Riggs's position and sprinted back to the cab, diving in headfirst as Elara threw the truck into reverse. With a groan of tearing metal, the 18-wheeler pulled out of the ruined barn. Sterling stood in the middle of the yard, his men regrouping around him. He raised his handgun and aimed carefully at the driver's side window. Ilara didn't give him the chance. She stomped on the gas, and the truck shot forward, not toward the blocked gate, but toward the perimeter fence, a simple barrier of wood posts and barbed wire. It was no match for the truck. They smashed through it, the sound of snapping wire and splintering wood barely audible over the engine's roar. They were out. They were on a dirt service road, speeding away from the ranch. For a moment, a wave of relief washed over JD. They had done it, but Ilara's face was still grim. "It's not over," she said, her eyes scanning the dark horizon. "We have no comms, and the nearest town is 30 miles away, Brody's territory." Back at the ranch, Sterling calmly lowered his gun. He watched the truck's taillights disappear into the night. He pulled out his phone, his movements unhurried. One of his men ran up. "Sir, they're getting away!" Sterling held up a hand to silence him and put the phone to his ear. "Sheriff Brody," he said, his voice cold and steady. "Our pest problem has left the property. They're in a big rig heading east on the old county road. Yes, the one with the bridge." A cruel smile touched his lips. "Let them run. They're driving straight into the cage we built for them. Block the highway. I want them alive." The truck bounced violently on the unpaved county road, the headlights cutting a frantic path through the pitch-black Texas night. In the cab, the silence was heavy, filled only by the roar of the diesel engine and the rattling of the chassis. The initial high of their escape was rapidly fading, replaced by the cold, hard reality of their situation. "He'll have called Brody by now," JD said, his voice strained. He was staring out the shattered passenger window as if he could see the trap closing in around them. "The sheriff will have roadblocks on every highway leading out of the county. We're driving a stolen rig full of people Sterling wants back, and we're heading straight for the wolf's den." "I know," Ilara said, her hands steady on the wheel. She kept her eyes on the road, her mind processing variables, calculating risks. Her training had prepared her for ambushes, for compromised operations, but not for this. Not for being a shepherd to a flock of terrified civilians with the entire corrupt local infrastructure bearing down on them. "This is my fault," JD continued, the guilt evident in his voice. "I worked for him. I looked the other way for years. If I had just done something sooner." "Looking back won't get us out of this," Ilara cut him off, her tone sharp but not unkind. "You made a choice tonight. That's the only one that matters right now. Sterling thinks he knows what we're going to do. He thinks we'll run for the highway. He's right. So we need to do something else." She turned to him, her eyes intense. "This is your home turf, JD. You know these back roads better than anyone. Is there another way, any way at all that avoids the bridge over Cedar Creek?" JD's brow furrowed in concentration. He was no longer just a passenger. He was a partner. He was being asked to contribute, to use the knowledge he had spent a lifetime accumulating. A flicker of an idea ignited in his mind. "There might be," he said slowly. "About a mile up, there's an old access road. It's not on any maps. It was used for logging decades ago. It's rough, probably overgrown. I don't know if a rig this big can make it." "We're about to find out," Ilara said, her decision made instantly. "Tell me where to turn." JD guided her to a barely visible break in the brush. Ilara slowed the massive truck and wrenched the wheel, forcing the 18-wheeler off the road and onto the forgotten trail. The change was immediate and brutal. Low-hanging branches scraped and screeched along the side of the trailer. The truck bucked and swayed over deep ruts and loose rocks. Ilara fought the wheel, her arms straining, her focus absolute. Every bump and jolt sent a sympathetic pang through her as she thought of the people locked in the back. After a few minutes of the punishing terrain, the trail crested a small rise. Through a gap in the trees, they could see the main county road below. And there, just as they had predicted, was the bridge over Cedar Creek. It was lit up like a crime scene, a barricade of sheriff's cruisers with their red and blue lights flashing, cutting off the only route to the highway. Sterling's trap was set and waiting. A grim satisfaction settled between them. They had outsmarted him. But their relief was short-lived. As Ilara navigated a particularly sharp downhill turn, there was a loud hiss, followed by a concussive bang. The truck swerved violently. "Tire blowout!" JD yelled. Ilara wrestled with the steering wheel, the rig threatening to jackknife. She managed to bring the lumbering vehicle to a shuddering halt, the engine sputtering and dieseling before falling silent. The sudden quiet was terrifying. They were stuck, miles from anywhere, on a dark, forgotten road, with a trailer full of witnesses and a compromised truck. In the distance, they could hear the faint sound of dogs barking. The hunt was far from over. JD looked at Ilara, the despair he felt moments ago replaced by a weary resolve. "Now what, Fed?" he asked, not with sarcasm, but as one soldier to another. Ilara didn't hesitate. She killed the lights, plunging them back into near-total darkness. The sound of the barking dogs was closer now, a chilling chorus that promised violence. "Now," she said, her voice ablaze in the quiet cab, "we stop running, we pick our ground, and we make our stand." She turned to JD, her expression unreadable in the gloom. "That logging road, where does it lead?" "It winds for another 5 miles and then peters out at the old camp," JD answered, his mind already catching up to her logic. "It's been abandoned for 30 years. Just a few dilapidated cabins and a rusty old sawmill. It's at the bottom of a ravine, surrounded by thick woods. Only one way in or out." "A bottleneck," Ilara said. It wasn't a question. "Can we get there on foot before they find the truck?" "If we move now, yes," JD confirmed. "They'll follow the road. They'll find the rig, but it'll take them time to sweep the woods and find the trail to the camp." "Time is all we need," Ilara said. She grabbed the 2 handguns, checked the ammunition by feel, and handed one to JD. "Let's go. We need to get these people moving." The scene at the back of the trailer was one of quiet panic. When Ilara unbolted the door, the faces that stared back were etched with fear and confusion. The sudden stop, the silence, the distant dogs. It was a recipe for terror. "Listen to me," Ilara said, her voice low, but carrying an authority that commanded their attention. "The truck is broken. We can't stay here. We're moving on foot to a place where we can defend ourselves. I need you to be silent, and I need you to be fast. Understood?" Nods rippled through the small crowd. They were terrified, but Ilara's confidence was a small anchor in their storm of fear. JD helped them down, his presence, a familiar if previously intimidating face from the ranch, adding a strange layer of reassurance. He was one of them now. The trek through the woods was an agonizing, tense affair. Every snapped twig sounded like a gunshot. Every rustle of leaves could be an approaching enemy. Ilara took the lead, JD the rear, herding the group of about 20 people through the dense undergrowth. The dogs were getting louder, a constant reminder that the clock was ticking. They finally stumbled into the clearing of the old logging camp. It was exactly as JD had described, a ghost town of rotting wood and rusting metal, shrouded in shadows. The single dirt track leading into the camp was their choke point. Ilara gathered the survivors in the relative cover of the largest cabin. "We have a choice," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the derelict space. "You can hide in here and pray they don't find you, or you can help us fight back." A terrified silence answered her. "They won't stop hunting you," she continued, her gaze sweeping over their faces. "Sterling can't afford witnesses. Hiding is a temporary solution. The only way any of us get out of this alive is to make sure they can't leave this ravine." A young man, his face smudged with dirt, stepped forward. "What can we do?" "We have nothing." "You have this," Ilara said, pointing to the decaying camp around them. "And you have numbers." JD stepped up beside her. "She's right. That old sawmill is full of rusted chains, heavy tools, scrap metal. We can block the road. We can make this place a nightmare for them." The spark of defiance caught. The young man who had spoken, Miguel, nodded. "I'll help." An older woman followed, then 2 more men. Soon, a small group of volunteers stood with them. The rest huddled in the cabin, their fear still too great. but their eyes were now filled with a desperate hope. The next hour was a blur of frantic, whispered activity. Under Ilara's direction and with JD's knowledge of the camp's layout, they worked. They dragged heavy logs and rusted machine parts to create a barricade across the narrow road. They sharpened long pieces of rebar from the sawmill's foundation. They positioned piles of rocks and scrap metal on the roofs of the cabins overlooking the entrance. They were turning a forgotten ruin into a fortress. As they put the final log on the barricade, JD looked at Ilara, a new respect in his eyes. "You've done this before." "Something like it," she replied, her face grim. Just then, the sound of the dogs stopped. A new sound replaced it, the low rumble of approaching engines. Far up the trail, a pair of headlights cut through the trees. They were coming. Ilara and JD took their positions behind the main barricade, weapons ready. "Tell everyone to get down and stay quiet," Ilara ordered Miguel. "It's starting." 2 SUVs and a sheriff's cruiser rolled to a stop just short of the barricade. The headlights swept across the clearing, painting the dilapidated cabins in a stark, revealing light. The engines died. Silence fell, thick and heavy. Doors opened. Sheriff Brody stepped out, flanked by Riggs and a half-dozen of Sterling's men. Sterling himself remained by his vehicle, a silhouette of arrogant confidence. "Ilara Vance!" Brody's voice boomed through a megaphone, distorted and metallic. "You are harboring fugitives. Come out with your hands up. You have nowhere to go." Ilara and JD exchanged a look. This was it. "They think this is a negotiation," Ilara whispered. "They're wrong." Riggs, impatient, stepped forward. "Enough of this. Let's go get 'em." He and 3 other men started cautiously toward the barricade, their rifles raised. "Wait for my signal," Ilara murmured to JD. The men reached the edge of the makeshift wall, trying to find a way through. They were exposed, bunched together. "Now," Ilara said. On her signal, a volley of scrap metal and heavy rocks rained down from the cabin roofs. A man screamed as a piece of rusted engine block crashed onto his shoulder, sending him to the ground. The sudden, primitive assault from the darkness threw them into confusion. "Fire!" Ilara commanded. She and JD opened up with their handguns, firing controlled single shots. The element of surprise was their greatest weapon. Another of Riggs's men stumbled back, clutching his leg. "Get cover!" Brody yelled, diving behind his cruiser. The clearing erupted into a full-blown firefight. Bullets tore through the rotting wood of the cabins, sending splinters flying. The air filled with the crack of gunfire and the shouts of angry men. Riggs, fueled by rage, scrambled over a low point in the barricade. He spotted JD and charged, a guttural roar ripping from his throat. "You traitor!" JD met him head-on. His handgun was empty. He threw it aside and tackled Riggs, the 2 men crashing to the ground in a tangle of limbs. It wasn't a tactical fight. It was a brawl. JD landed a solid punch to Riggs's jaw, but Riggs responded by driving his knee into JD's ribs. While they fought, Ilara used the diversion to lay down covering fire, forcing Brody and his deputy to stay pinned behind their car. She was counting her shots, making every one matter, but she knew they were hopelessly outgunned. It was only a matter of time. JD rolled on top of Riggs, his hands closing around the man's throat. Riggs clawed at his face, but JD's grip was iron, fueled by 5 years of buried grief and guilt. "This is for my sister," he snarled, his face inches from Riggs's. "This is for all of them." Suddenly, a new sound cut through the chaos. It started as a faint, rhythmic chopping in the distance, but it grew louder, faster. Everyone on both sides of the barricade hesitated and looked up. 2 black, unmarked helicopters roared over the ridge, their searchlights instantly flooding the entire ravine with brilliant white light. Men in black tactical gear began rappelling down before the helicopters even touched the ground. Sterling's face, illuminated in the harsh glare, was a perfect picture of disbelief turning to horror. Sheriff Brody dropped his weapon, his hands shooting into the air. A calm, amplified voice echoed from one of the helicopters. "This is a federal operation. "Drop your weapons now!" Ilara lowered her handgun, a grim smile finally touching her lips. "My check-in was 2 hours overdue," she said to a stunned JD, who was still kneeling over a gasping Riggs. "Failsafe protocol, they tracked my last known location." The fight was over. Sterling's private army and his corrupt lawmen were surrounded, caught in a cage of their own making. Justice hadn't come from the local sheriff's office. It had come from the sky. The efficiency of the federal tactical team was brutal and absolute. Within minutes, Sterling, Brody, and every last one of their men were disarmed and forced to their knees, their hands secured with zip ties. The arrogance on Sterling's face had curdled into a mask of cold, silent fury. As a federal agent cuffed him, his eyes found Ilara's. "This isn't over," he hissed. "People like me don't just disappear." Ilara walked over to him, her face impassive. She was no longer a trucker. She was an officer of the law, and her authority was undeniable. "You're right," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "You won't disappear. You'll be a number in a federal prison for the rest of your life. And every single day, you'll be remembered as the man who was brought down by the truck driver you underestimated." Medical teams moved in to care for the rescued victims, wrapping them in blankets and leading them toward the helicopters. JD stood apart, watching the scene unfold. The war was over, but his own battle was just beginning. An agent approached him, but Ilara held up a hand. "He's with me," she said. "He's our key witness." Weeks later, the Redstone Cattle Ranch was a federal crime scene. The investigation had ripped the lid off the entire conspiracy. With JD's testimony and the evidence Ilara had gathered, warrants were executed across 3 states. Judge Miller was arrested in his chambers, his face pale with shock. The network Sterling had built over a decade crumbled in less than a month. Ilara met JD at a federal safe house. He looked different, the hard lines on his face softened by a mixture of grief and relief. "They found her," Ilara said gently, not needing to say the name. "Riggs confessed to get a deal. He told us where Sarah was buried. She fought back, JD right to the end. She didn't let them win." Tears streamed down JD's face, the first he had allowed himself to shed in 5 long years. It was an ending filled with pain, but it was an ending. He finally had the truth. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "for everything." 6 months passed. The trials were swift, the evidence overwhelming. Sterling and his inner circle received multiple life sentences. The survivors, including Miguel, were placed in witness protection and began the long, difficult process of rebuilding their lives. J.D. Vance was never charged. His testimony was too crucial. He sold his small plot of land and disappeared for a while. When he resurfaced, it was as a volunteer at a rural shelter for victims of trafficking, using his knowledge of ranch life to help others find peace in the quiet strength of the land. He was paying his penance not in a cell, but through service. In a sterile office in Washington, D.C., Agent Ilara Vance closed the Redstone file. Her mission was complete. On her desk sat a new, thicker file with a new target in a different state. She picked it up, her expression hardening with the same quiet, unshakable resolve she'd had behind the wheel of her truck. The fight was never truly over. There were always more monsters to hunt. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If you believe in the power of justice and want to see more stories like this, show your support. And if you made it this far, let us know by commenting "I watched until the end," and be sure to click on one of the amazing stories that just appeared on your screen. 1 year later, the Texas sun was just as relentless, but it no longer beat down on a place of fear. The rusted sign for the Redstone Cattle Ranch was gone, replaced by a simple painted wooden one that read, "The Sarah Vance Sanctuary." After the federal asset forfeiture, Ilara had quietly pushed for the land to be repurposed. It was now a sprawling, peaceful recovery center for survivors of trafficking, a place where the land itself could be part of the healing. J.D. Vance was still there, but he was no longer a foreman. He was the groundskeeper. He no longer barked orders, he taught. Today, he was showing a young woman named Maria, one of the survivors from that night, how to properly set a new fence post. "You have to make sure the foundation is solid," he said, his voice softer than it had ever been. "Otherwise, the first big storm will knock it right over." Maria nodded, tamping the dirt down around the post. "Like building a new life, huh?" JD looked at her and managed a small, genuine smile. Exactly like that. His gaze drifted to a large oak tree on a nearby hill. Beneath it was a simple, single stone, marking his sister's final resting place. He had brought her home. The guilt of his inaction would never fully leave him, but here, surrounded by the lives he had helped save, it had transformed into a quiet, unwavering purpose. He wasn't just fixing fences. He was mending a part of his own broken soul. Hundreds of miles away, in a sterile briefing room, Agent Ilara Vance stood before a class of new undercover recruits. A satellite image of the Sarah Vance sanctuary was projected on the screen behind her. "Your cover is a tool, not a shield," she told the room of eager faces. "It's meant to get you close to the target, but never let it make you lose sight of the mission's objective, the people. In every operation, there will be a JD Vance. Someone on the inside who has looked the other way, someone who is drowning in guilt and might just be looking for a reason to do the right thing. Your job is to find that person. They can be more valuable than any piece of intel." She didn't tell war stories. She taught lessons forged in fire and dust. Her reputation within the Bureau had grown, not just as a formidable field agent, but as a mentor who understood the deep psychological toll of the job. After the class, she returned to her office. On her desk was a plain manila envelope with no return address, postmarked from the small Texas town she'd left behind. Inside, there was no letter, just a child's crayon drawing. It was a picture of a huge 18-wheeler truck. In the driver's seat, a stick figure with a determined smile was waving. Below it, in shaky, childish letters, was a single word: "Thank you." Ilara looked at the drawing for a long moment. She pinned it to the corkboard next to the new case file she was preparing to open. The fight continued, but the picture was a stark reminder of why it was always worth it. Justice wasn't just about closing a file, it was about the lives that were opened up because of it. The story of Ilara and JD is a powerful reminder that evil often flourishes not in the shadows but in plain sight, protected by silence and intimidation. It's a testament to the fact that one person, armed with courage and an unshakable sense of duty, can dismantle an empire of corruption. Ilara wasn't just a federal agent. She was a symbol of quiet strength, proving that you don't need to be the loudest voice in the room to be the most powerful. And in JD, we see the difficult but essential journey of redemption, the realization that it is never too late to stand up and fight for what is right, even if it means confronting the mistakes of your own past. This story is more than just a tale of crime and justice. It's about the unexpected heroes who walk among us. It's about recognizing that the potential for incredible bravery exists within everyone, waiting for the right moment to be called upon. It challenges us to look beyond first impressions and to never underestimate the resolve of someone who is fighting for a cause greater than themselves. If this story resonated with you, and if you believe that these messages of courage and accountability need to be heard, please help our channel grow. Hitting the like button tells us that you value this kind of content, and subscribing ensures that you won't miss another story. Sharing this video with just one friend can help this powerful message reach someone who needs to hear it. We pour countless hours into crafting these narratives, and your support is what keeps us going. To show us you're part of our core community and to help this story reach even more people, please take a moment to comment below with the phrase, "I watched until the end." It's a small action that makes a huge difference for our channel, and it lets us know that you were with us for every step of this journey. The fight for justice continues, and we have many more stories to tell. On your screen now are 2 more videos we've selected just for you. Each one is a gripping tale of struggle, resilience, and the ultimate triumph of the human spirit. Click on one of them to continue. Thank you for being here with us. We'll see you in the next story.